Hey everybody, my name is Nick Ravel and I play viola, and I created DragonScales. It's my 3-octave scale and arpeggio audio play-along system for violin, viola, and cello, available on the web. I'll leave a link in the description. So far in this video series, we've talked a lot about how to get the most out of your DragonScales audio play-alongs. At the request of viewers, I now have new ideas for content that have less to do with DragonScales specifically and more to do with the practice process in general. The last video we covered sight reading, and I gave you some tips on how to work on it on your own so that when you get to the chamber music party, you're ready to go. In this video, we're going to start a new series, a mini-series called Smart Practice. God knows I've wasted a lot of time in my day in the practice room trying to figure out what I'm doing. Hopefully this mini-series will give you a little bit of clarity and some ideas on how to navigate setting goals, creating methods to achieve those goals, and using awareness to see if those methods were effective at achieving your goals. This is the first video, setting goals, and if you're curious about what that means and how to structure your practice, stick around, hit that like button, subscribe, and let's jump right in. If you're someone who gets pure and utter joy from playing your instrument, and you have no complaints about the sound that you're making or how you feel when you're making that sound, you've won. You are done. You don't need to make goals. You don't need to practice. You just need to play, and that is a beautiful thing. And I believe there are people out there like that. I, unfortunately, and I think a lot of us, are not that way. We play something, and while we might think it's a good take, or a good run-through, or a good performance, inevitably there's going to be things that we wish we had done differently. Anything from my body felt uncomfortable to, oh, I remember that spot was out of tune, stuff like that. This video is for you. This is about setting goals in the practice room to make your practice more efficient. So what do I mean by goals? Goals can be extremely general, like I want to play with more physical ease, and can take years to really achieve, or they can be extremely specific and really only take a couple minutes of attention, like, again, that one shift in bar 33 was out of tune. Goals in an ideal world should keep you focused with good energy in the practice room so that you know what you're doing. I think if we back up and zoom out, everybody's goal is to play music that is ultimately fulfilling and full of joy. The things that get in the way are, as I said, the physical ease or discomfort, the sounds that we create, and the feeling of aliveness or boredom that we have with the music itself. The question is, what are the goals we need to do and make in order to move forward? So some specific examples. It can be really tricky to formulate a goal if you don't know what you want. Play better is way too vague, right? It's not going to lead to anything productive unless you've already got a short list of goals embedded within that bigger goal. Sometimes bigger goals can be broken down into smaller goals. I find that for me, goals usually fall into roughly three or four categories. The body, how we play our instrument with our body, the intonation, the time feel or rhythm, and then the expression. All of those can have very different goals and very different methods to try and achieve them. We're not going to talk about methods in this video. That's next video. So, for example, with the body, if I do a run-through of a piece, and I notice by the end that I feel a little stiff in my shoulder, that happens sometimes. Well, I could easily reverse engineer that problem into a goal by saying, I want to play with less stiffness in my shoulder. Now all of a sudden I have a goal. It can be really helpful to do a little writing exercise after you've gone through and played your piece. Just jot down all the places, specific and general, where you found either discomfort with your body or with the sound, or you just weren't satisfied for some reason, even if you don't know why. That list of problems is going to become the goals that you will then try to solve. I think a lot of the other goals that we make in terms of intonation, rhythm, and expression can be solved or attacked much easier if we're really freed up in our body. So, for example, you can have a general sort of body goal of saying, I want to remember to check in with my body as I play. That's your goal. So as you're playing, you've got a couple things on your brain as you're playing through your music, including, am I breathing? Do I feel balance in my body? Can I feel the arm, hand, finger connection in my left arm at all times when I'm playing? Moving on to intonation. For me, even if my body is going well and I can hear the phrasing that I want to do, feel really into the music, if I hit a note that's a little sour, it can kind of ruin the whole experience for me. Yes, of course, I'm worried about what the listener will think when I play an out-of-tune note, but really it actually affects me. My own judgment of my playing, my own experience of listening to the music that I'm making has been negatively affected. So I want to make sure that my intonation is as focused as possible. Now, the problem with intonation, before we get into a whole thing, is it's less fixed than I think we want to believe it is. Unless we're playing with a piano, intonation is on a very slidey, bendy range, especially when you're playing in a string quartet or an orchestra or something. There's a lot of notes that do bend, and we're going to do a whole nother mini series on intonation, the harmonic series, the comma, all that good stuff in future content. But for now, let's just assume we all kind of know what we want in terms of intonation. So another way to make goals is to sometimes ask yourself questions as if you were going to ask possibly a young student. That's not in an effort to belittle yourself or anything like that. It can literally just transform very quickly into a goal, and then all of a sudden you have goals, which is good. So for example, can I hear the next note in my head? Talking about intonation. If we know where that intonation issue is, can I hear it? That question easily turns into, I want to hear the intonation on the next note. I want to hear the next note. Now, just an example, a method could be, let me sing. Let me sing that note. If you can hear it, you can sing it. If you can't hear it, you can't sing it. That's method. That's next video. Another question is, do I know where that next note exists on my instrument? Assuming our strings are really well in tune, intonation on a string instrument is fixed. They exist in places, and we need to put our fingers on those places. So do I know where the note exists turns into, I want to know where that note exists. That's your goal. And then you can experiment with shifting or experiment with crossing strings, experiment from going one finger to another finger, etc. Can I hear my actual intonation? I've noticed a lot with my students and myself, I don't like to admit it, but it's true, that when we play, we're sometimes only hearing what we want to hear in our head. We're not actually hearing what's coming out of the instrument. And there's a big distinction between those two things. So can I hear my actual intonation is basically, can I hear what I'm actually playing? Can I be real about that with myself? And the goal there is, I want to hear what I'm actually playing. That might require you, again, this is method, but it might require you to put more focus on the sound, the tone of your instrument, the tone of your sound that's coming out, right? And not judge it harshly, but just be aware of it. Ask yourself in that moment, like, okay, am I hearing? Is it matching up with what I'm hearing in my head? That's the idea there. And then after you've kind of worked through those goals, or you've at least established those goals, can I do all of them consistently for this passage? Turns into, I want to do this consistently for this passage. So now on intonation, you've got a whole set of goals based on those questions that you can apply generally or very specifically. As specific as a single note or two notes, like going from one note to another note. The more you use this sort of goal system, the more targeted you can practice these problems out of your playing. And it won't just be, I'm focusing on this one spot, now I have another million spots to go. That one spot will sort of expand and spread out to your general abilities on your instrument. You'll become more aware of your sound. Another area for me is rhythm, time, and flow. Music is unique in that it exists in time. It's not like a painting or a sculpture. It's constantly shifting and morphing. There is no just static. Even if you play a single note for a long time, that note is still changing. It's still happening in time. So time is a really crucial thing. Even if you've gotten all of your rhythms and your tempo is steady and you feel pulse, there's still things within time that we need to address. In fact, some of those things can, again, be turned into questions, which then can be turned into goals. So, do I know the rhythm? I want to know the rhythm. Do I know the pulse? I want to know the pulse. You know what I mean? It's just very simple. The method comes later. Again, that'll be next video. But the goal setting is the first step in this process. And the last realm for me is expression. To me, this is sort of the most fun. I don't know if it's good to save it for the end. I don't think it necessarily has to be the last thing. And I should mention that all these sort of categories and the steps in the process, in reality, it's all messier than a very clean, tidy checklist kind of thing. But I think for the purposes of this video and this little mini-series, we're going to try and keep it very clean, very organized, so as to create a structure for which our messiness can exist. Expression, I think, is everything that can affect the mood or style of your playing. It's sort of the heart and the soul of it. It's the sort of the reason why we're doing it, right? So there's basic things like dynamics, articulation, tone, and phrasing. There's, subtle intentional changes to rhythm or intonation can really affect the mood, the style. There's tone. There's like arcs, like are you kind of connecting with this emotionally, and is that happening in your playing? So goals could be, for example, again, this question idea. Do I feel connected to this music? And if the answer is no, then your goal might be, I want to feel connected to this music. Methods, we're going to talk about that next video, might be, let's listen to some recordings. Let's find the version of this piece that I like the most and try and figure out why. That's a method. The goal, remember, is I want to feel connected emotionally to this piece. Sometimes context of a piece is really important. And a lot of times we get a little lazy about researching where the piece was written or when it was written or like what was going on in the composer's life when they wrote this piece. So I want to know the context of this piece. That might give you insight into how you want to express the piece. And if you're still sort of struggling to make goals within this realm of expression, you can get a little bit more specific and a little bit more experimental and sort of do this sort of mixing and matching of, I guess, styles or eras. So for example, if you're playing a piece by Mozart, you might have the goal of, I want to express this as if I were playing Shostakovich. Because that can totally break any preconceived notions of how you think Mozart should go and give you more freedom to do what you want. Now that's a really weird combo. I just picked that out of nowhere. And I'm not necessarily advising that you do that. You should make the piece sound how you want to make it. But if you're stuck, that can be an easy way of freeing up some of those stuck gears. Lastly, I think a lot of us classical musicians, especially in terms of the expression, are taught by our teachers how to express the piece, like how the piece should go. And I think there's not quite enough emphasis, usually, on how do you want the piece to go. A lot of the times, especially in my own playing, I just hear echoes of my teachers in my head as I'm playing. I sort of know what I'm supposed to do, but is that really what I want to do? So your first step might be to make a goal saying, I want to play this the way I hear it. Or maybe even more specifically, I don't want to hear my teacher's voices in my head when I'm playing this. The methods to those goals will differ depending on the person and your history with your teachers, etc. But that's a good place to start. I think in the end, you, especially in terms of expression, should trust your musical instincts. That's another good question. Do I trust my musical instincts? And if the answer is no, your goal is, I want to trust my musical instincts. So, there's a lot of information. This is a bit of a talking video. I held my viola and didn't play a single note. Here. There we go. This is not an exhaustive list. This is just some ideas on how to generate goals. I think this process will become more, easier to understand as we go through the mini-series, as we check out the methods, and then this third video using awareness to see if our methods actually achieve the goals. I know it's a little abstract, and if you're feeling like you have more questions right now than answers, that's okay. We'll get to them. For now, I want to hear from you. Has this video given you any ideas? Has it given you more confusion than when you started? Do you have ideas for content in the future? I would love to hear all about it in the comments. So I'll say for now, thanks so much for watching. Hit that like button, subscribe, and happy practicing.